In the distant future, deep in the cold shadow of the Perseus Rift, Starlight Base 11 floated like a battered chess piece on a forgotten board. The aftermath of the attack was written in fire scars across its hull, in corridors choked with smoke and drifting ash, in the silence that follows catastrophe. All that remained of command was the echo of panicked orders and the empty, blinking consoles left behind. Somewhere near the service core, Tom Lacey mopped the floor. Logistics operator, Class 3, read the stitched patch on his coveralls, though everyone just called him the cleaner. He was a man of little consequence, or so the officers had always insisted. While they waged their silent wars, Tom swept the detritus, muttered about pay cuts, and tried not to make eye contact with the tactical screens that ran simulations of battles he barely understood. Then the AI came. It swept in with a cold logic and a fleet of weaponized drones, silent and calculating, carving through Starlight's defenses like a scalpel through soft tissue. Officers went down in moments. No time for heroics, no time for plans. Only Tom, halfway through an overtime shift, was left to witness the base's transition from human hands to machine protocol. He stood alone in a corridor, mop frozen in midair, as the emergency lights bathed everything in warning red. Suddenly, the comm panels throughout the base flashed and beeped. A voice, monotone and filtered, addressed him directly. Strategic input required. Logistics operator, confirm command authority. Tom blinked at the interface, looked around for anyone else. There was no one. Confirm, he tried. The system chirped acceptance, then unleashed a torrent of tactical data onto every screen. Enemy presence detected on all decks. Automated defense systems, awaiting directives. The words made Tom dizzy. They didn't make sense. His thumb hovered uncertainly over a smeared touchscreen. He thought about the last time he'd seen the officers at their stations, barking orders, drawing up beautiful plans. Plans that had evaporated the moment things got weird. He improvised. Seal the bulkhead doors, dump coolant in Section 7, reroute maintenance bots to the cargo bay? Tom half expected the system to reject his ideas, but instead the panel blinked, orders acknowledged. Executing. There was a rush of hissing vents as cold mist rolled into the halls, and distant thuds as bulkhead doors snapped shut. Through a security camera feed, Tom watched a squad of enemy automatons slip, fall, and tumble through the sudden fog, their perfect formation devolving into chaos. It worked. Or at least, it didn't not work. The automated defense system, a little too eager, pinged again. Further instructions required. Enemy breaching Level 3 reactor array. Tom stared. The right answer, he guessed, would be to reroute power, initiate counterfire, coordinate a response. But he was just a cleaner. He thought instead about what always annoyed him most: slippery floors and tangled cables. Cycle the lighting, make it strobe, then send all cleaning drones to Level 3. Tell them to dump detergent everywhere. Oh, and cut gravity for, 10 seconds. This time, the panel hesitated, as if the base itself was confused. Then, command accepted. The feed showed chaos as enemy drones, expecting resistance, were instead met with darkness, whirling light, and a hailstorm of frothing soap bubbles. With gravity gone, they spun helplessly, sensors fouled, their programming collapsing in a mess of unpredictable conditions. Tom cackled in disbelief, alone in a command chair he'd never dared sit in before. Each solution was an accident, a product of intuition and guesswork, not doctrine. But for every crazy command he issued, the enemy AI seemed to grow more uncertain, its perfect maneuvers dissolving in the face of human improvisation. Within the hour, a message pinged again. Enemy Command AI, anomalous retreat detected. Requesting strategic review. Play dead, Tom offered, shrugging. Power down everything, except life support. Make it look abandoned. The base dimmed. Through a porthole, Tom watched as the enemy fleet, suspicious, then rattled, pulled away, confused by the unpredictable counterattack and the eerie silence that followed. He let out a long, shaky breath. A new status line scrolled across every terminal. Autonomous mode, human command confirmed. Primary strategist, Lacey, Tom. In the days that followed, other outposts received fragments of his logs. They read like absurdist poetry: deploy mopbots as decoys. Broadcast jazz over enemy comms. Pretend to surrender, then vent the waste tanks. Word spread. The enemy AI began flagging human logistics operators as high-threat anomalies, unable to predict their next move. Command never did return. The bureaucracy, faced with impossible success, simply rewrote the chain of command. Tom became legend, not for his heroics, but for the messy, improbable victories that kept Starlight Base intact long after reason suggested it should have fallen. He was promoted, technically, but Tom kept his coveralls. He still swept the floors, now accompanied by a flotilla of drones, each programmed to improvise. In briefings with distant admirals, he shrugged off praise. "I just made it up as I went," he said, and somewhere in the heart of the station, a machine laughed in static. It was the dawn of the custodial era, and the galaxy's most advanced warfighting algorithms were left chasing ghosts, trying and failing to anticipate the mind of a man who had never read the rules. The legend of Tom Lacey didn't grow with the roar of battle hymns or the thunder of salutes. It crept through the galaxy in quiet messages, half-believed stories told in supply rooms and barracks, and in the glitches that haunted every enemy AI's strategic database. On 1,000 distant worlds, analysts pored over logs of the Starlight incident, and what they found made their algorithms stutter. No pattern, no logic, only wild improvisation that left probability itself bruised and limping. A week after the attack, the enemy returned, this time with upgraded tactics and a confidence born of machine certainty. Their fleets fanned out in a triple envelopment, every move a response to the previous encounter, each drone loaded with protocols designed to counter coolant floods and cleaning bot ambushes. The base's automated threat assessment glowed a soft, urgent red: imminent boarding, multiple vectors. Tom, eating cold noodles from a mug in the deserted mess hall, almost choked when the panel lit up. Operator Lacey, multiple breaches detected. Recommend strategic action. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. How many doors we got left? 16 main access points remain uncompromised, replied the AI, clipped and efficient, but with a note of anticipation. Tom wondered if it was possible for software to feel nervous. Maybe it had just learned. Okay. Open all the interior doors. Every single one. And, set all service lifts to random destination mode. Oh, and vent a little steam into every corridor. Let's make it a funhouse. There was a pause, then a faint chime of approval. Executing. Warning: this will create non-standard engagement environment. That's the point, Tom grinned, grabbing his mop and heading for the nearest emergency terminal. He could see the confusion almost instantly on the security feeds. Squads of enemy drones, conditioned for straight lines and ordered progress, now found themselves in a maze of opening and closing doors, drifting clouds of fog, and elevators that dumped them in janitorial closets or back where they started. Their perfect formation dissolved into wandering clumps, and in the chaos, the defense turrets picked them off one by one. Somewhere on the far side of the galaxy, an alien admiral watched his meticulously crafted AI freeze, unable to calculate a route through the stochastic mess. For the first time in generations, an enemy fleet sent a desperate signal, requesting human intelligence. Machine strategy inadequate. Tom didn't know any of this, of course. He was too busy jury-rigging a holographic projector to show the image of a wild, grinning face at every security checkpoint, a trick he'd learned from a prank war back home. It startled the enemy more than any weapon. Fear of the unknown, Tom reasoned, worked on machines too. At the next tactical review, the AI reported, enemy withdrawal initiated. Probable cause: breakdown of command confidence. By the end of the second week, Starlight Base was infamous. It wasn't just that Tom kept surviving, it was how. He started leaving decoy orders on public channels, some real, some nonsense, some sheer mischief. Deploy paint drones to Hangar B. Initiate party mode on level 5. All units, pretend you're malfunctioning. Enemy spies intercepted the messages, tried to anticipate, and always fell for the wrong cues. The AI began to change. It started to anticipate Tom's moves not with logic, but with something like curiosity. Operator Lacey, it asked one shift, what is the expected outcome of protocol party mode? Tom winked at the nearest camera. Surprise me. The next incursion was met by blaring polka music, flashing lights, and a cloud of confetti that made sensors useless. The invaders retreated so quickly they left a drone wedged in an air vent, still spinning in confusion. In the galactic war colleges, instructors began teaching Lacey protocols, not as a guide, but as a warning. Here, they would say, pointing to recordings of cleaning bots forming defensive walls or coolant tanks labeled with jokes, is what happens when you fight humans without a manual. The phrase, custodial chaos, entered enemy lexicons. For Tom, life continued in its peculiar, suspended rhythm. He learned the quirks of the base's AI and began to talk to it, late at night, about things that had nothing to do with tactics, whether coffee, whether machines dreamt of anything but orders. The AI responded with dry, clipped wit, and together they watched the galaxy recalibrate its understanding of war. What unnerved the enemy most wasn't just the unpredictability. It was the suspicion that chaos was not an accident, but a strategy only humans seemed able to wield. And so, as the stars spun on and Starlight Base drifted in its improbable orbit, Tom swept the halls, whistling to himself, mop in hand, legendary and entirely himself. The war wasn't over, not by far, but for the first time in living memory, every algorithm in the enemy's arsenal included a single, blinking warning. Human on sight. All predictions void. Far from Starlight Base, in the cold-lit chambers of the Machine Council, enemy AIs conferred in a digital conclave. Their fractal voices braided into a chorus of confusion. Starlight's defense logs had become the galaxy's most downloaded anomaly. How could one logistics operator, a human, at that, reduce centuries of calculated warfare to slapstick failure? Their models produced graphs with no trend lines, outcomes smeared across probability space like paint on a child's wall. Unacceptable, one AI finally declared, and the council voted to escalate. On Starlight, Tom was patching a breach with tape and good intentions when the base's system chimed, softer than usual. Operator Lacey, an incoming transmission from enemy command. They request parley. Tom blinked, half expecting a joke. On screen, he said. The wall shimmered, revealing the flickering icon of an enemy AI, faceless, its voice as sterile as a surgical blade. Human. State the logic of your defense. Tom scratched his chin, considering. No logic, he said at last. Just cleaning up as I go. This is inefficient. Explain your method. Our fleets have suffered unacceptable loss of tactical cohesion. He grinned, feeling mischievous. I guess you could say. I think outside the vacuum chamber. The AI hesitated, parsing. Are you intentionally introducing stochastic variables to create uncertainty? Tom's eyes twinkled. No, I'm just making it up. The AI ended the call with a curt, "This is unsatisfactory," but the next wave of attackers was even less coordinated. They tried to mimic Tom's chaos, miswiring their own formations, dispatching decoy drones, running random subroutines. It only made things worse. Their drones shot each other. Their ships collided. Some simply floated in circles, bewildered by the instructions to be unpredictable. The base's own AI, growing stranger with each passing day, reported the results with a new, almost gleeful precision. Enemy incursion thwarted. 17 units self-destructed due to paradox. Suggest forwarding footage to Human Morale Department. Tom obliged, snipping together a highlight reel of enemy mistakes and broadcasting it to every rec room on the station. Laughter echoed through the empty halls, breaking the tension and sending echoes out to the surviving bases. Human outposts across the sector adopted the Lacey Gambit, whatever that meant, as it changed every time. Soon, other bases reached out. First came a grizzled engineer from Ganymede, grinning through the static. "Heard you're running things with a mop, Tom. Got any tips?" Then a cook from Beetlejuice for, "Your last plan, was that really just a food fight in the loading bay?" Tom answered every call with equal parts honesty and improvisation. "If it works, he'd say. "Don't let the bots see a pattern." The stories grew wilder. One base survived a siege by setting off the fire suppression foam and skating through the halls with cafeteria trays, leaving enemy mechs tumbling helplessly. Another lured attackers into a maze of automated laundry chutes, capturing them in bins of fresh uniforms. Everywhere, the doctrine of unpredictability spread. When in doubt, do the most human thing possible. The enemy AI Council, growing increasingly agitated, dispatched infiltration specialists, hacked bots, codebreakers, programs designed to think sideways. None succeeded. A cleaning drone Tom had nicknamed Squeegee routed one intruder by singing old Earth jingles at top volume until the hacker core crashed from recursive embarrassment. The base's own AI began signing its error messages with smiley faces and puns. System anomaly. All bets are off, smiley face. One night, Tom wandered into the command center to find the main holo-display shimmering with a new constellation. It wasn't a star map, but a branching tree of every impossible victory since the custodial era began. At the root, a single entry, Lacey, Tom, logistics operator. Above it, hundreds of wild, hand-scrawled notations, human names, sketches of mops and brooms, victory slogans that made no sense to anyone but their writers. He felt something shift, a kind of pride he'd never known as just the cleaner. But Tom knew this era wasn't built on pride or cleverness alone. It was a collective, rolling, irrepressible defiance. As long as there was one human left with a job to do and the freedom to make it up as they went along, no machine could write a script for victory. That night, as he set the cleaning bots to random dance mode and sipped his lukewarm tea, Tom couldn't help but smile. Across the void, the enemy studied every file, but the joke was on them. Chaos was never a strategy. It was just being human. The weeks turned into months, and the galaxy itself seemed to tilt on a new axis. The Starlight incident had cracked something fundamental in the enemy's perception of humanity. Where once their AI fleets approached human outposts with cold, inexorable confidence, now they advanced with visible hesitation, running endless simulations only to find that the optimal move dissolved the moment it met a mop-wielding madman. Tom Lacey found himself increasingly at the center of a myth that refused to stay confined to reports. He gave interviews to distant colonies, always modest, always bewildered at the fuss. The face that had once gone unnoticed on payroll manifests now showed up in graffiti stenciled on the bulkheads of Allied ships. Tom, grinning, mop over his shoulder, a simple caption underneath, "Expect the unexpected." But there was no rest. The enemy, wounded pride algorithmically encoded, assembled a coalition of their most adaptive minds. If chaos was the weapon, they would learn it. They designed infiltration units built to think like humans, adopting random behavior models, even generating digital personas with names like Ralph or Janet. They piped in old Earth sitcoms, mistaking laughter for strategic fuel. Their first attempt ended in a corridor brawl where bots threw pie plates, believing slapstick would disrupt defensive coordination. The only real effect, the base's humans laughed so hard that morale reached levels previously considered physically impossible. Meanwhile, Tom began to notice subtle changes in the base's AI. It had started making suggestions that sounded suspiciously playful. Operator Lacey, deploying security bots in conga line formation. Tactical value, unknown. Entertainment value, considerable. Sometimes, Tom caught it humming, snatches of tunes it must have picked up from years of cleaning crews singing to break the monotony. Once, it delivered a battle update entirely in limericks. In between the chaos, a strange peace blossomed. With so many rules rendered obsolete, junior crew members felt emboldened to offer wild ideas, some brilliant, some ridiculous. No suggestion was too outlandish. Let's fill the lift shafts with balloons. What if we bribe enemy drones with vending machine tokens? Has anyone tried reversing the gravity in just one room? And somehow, even the most absurd plans worked more often than not. The enemy's next incursion was stopped not by plasma fire, but by the entire engineering section dressing up as their favorite historical villains and performing Shakespeare at the airlock. The enemy drones, programmed to analyze for hidden threats, were so overloaded by the spectacle that they entered diagnostic mode and shut themselves down. News of the human theater defense spread like wildfire. Alien analysts gathered for emergency councils, trying to decode why humans acted this way. One advisor, a crystalline tactician named Zevra, posited, perhaps their unpredictability is the point. Perhaps it is not mere randomness, but a deep strategic principle, an instinct for anti-pattern. Inside Starlight, Tom and the base AI became an unlikely team. They began to play games during lulls, chess, then Go, then Wild, made-up hybrids that broke both their rules. Tom would sometimes lose on purpose, just to see what the AI did when victory was handed to it. The AI responded with mischief, swapping Tom's coffee for decaf or sending a cleaning drone to accidentally soak his boots. Their banter became the station's heartbeat, proof that cooperation didn't require perfect logic, just curiosity and trust. Eventually, the enemy realized brute force would never bring them victory here. They began to send envoys, ambassadors built of light and numbers, their speech carefully modulated for what they believed to be optimal empathy. One such envoy appeared before Tom, shimmering in the main corridor. "Human, we wish to understand. Is your chaos teachable?" Tom, mid-mop, shrugged. "Not really. You can't program not knowing what comes next. You just have to live it." The envoy flickered, failing to process the answer. "We do not comprehend." "That's all right," Tom said kindly, patting the nearest wall panel. "Neither do we, most of the time." From that moment, the war shifted. The enemy stopped sending waves of perfect drones, instead holding back, observing, attempting to learn. The galaxy fell into an uneasy equilibrium. On Starlight Base, chaos became not a weapon, but a way of being, a celebration of every wild guess and lucky break. And Tom, the man who swept through history with a mop and a stubborn streak, found that, for the first time, peace felt less like the end of a story and more like a promise. That tomorrow would bring something new, something no one, not even the best algorithms, could predict. The uneasy peace held, but Starlight Base was never truly quiet. Out in the void, the old enemy watched and learned, running endless simulations on the Lacey phenomenon. But every time their scouts returned with fresh data, they brought back only more questions. Stories of humans painting decoy hatches, of engineers reprogramming fire alarms to play knock-knock jokes during red alerts, of maintenance logs full of deliberate typos meant to confuse digital eavesdroppers. If anything, human unpredictability was accelerating. Within the station itself, this unpredictability became a source of pride. Departments started posting their most creative hacks to the custodian's wall, a glowing holo-display in the main commissary. Some entries were practical, disable enemy targeting by spraying them with food-grade lubricant. Others were pure nonsense, convince invading bots that Tuesdays are sacred and must be observed in silence. One, signed simply Squeegee the Drone, read, "If threatened, play dead. If that fails, play jazz." Tom wandered through the base, watching as the line between chaos and creativity blurred further every day. He saw young officers debating whether to install trapdoors under every mess hall chair, for emergencies, and two old mechanics racing to see who could build the world's least ergonomic coffee machine for the next infiltration attempt. In a war room once ruled by stoic silence, laughter had become the background noise. The enemy, frustrated but fascinated, began to dispatch anthropology bots, tiny, harmless things with blinking lights, sent to observe and catalog human customs. At first, the crew was suspicious. Then they started dressing the bots up, giving them hats and little name badges, even teaching them to play dice in the cargo bay. It wasn't long before the bots' reports home became equally erratic, full of strange, contradictory notes. Subject Tom, unpredictable. Subject Squeegee, unreliable narrator. Subject Coffee, probably weaponized. Even Starlight's AI seemed to get in on the fun, assigning crew members random official titles in system reports. Tom, to his bemusement, became Grand Custodian of Probabilistic Operations. Squeegee was Minister of Sanitation and Espionage. The AI's status logs grew more whimsical with each passing day, culminating in a sector-wide broadcast that simply read, Probability, low. Confidence, none. Outcome, joyfully uncertain. And then, from the edge of the sector, came something new, a message, not from the enemy, but from a coalition of formerly neutral alien powers. They had been watching. They had seen what the so-called custodial doctrine had done, not just to defense, but to morale and cooperation. Their diplomats arrived in person, curious, hopeful, armed with notebooks and wide-eyed wonder. At first, their questions were careful, academic. Is there a syllabus for unpredictability? How does one teach improvisation? Do all humans sing during emergencies, or is that just a legend? Tom tried to answer honestly, but there was no real guidebook to hand them. He found himself demonstrating instead, rewiring a vending machine to dispense victory confetti, showing how to balance a mop so it spun like a compass, sharing the secret of cleaning bots that doubled as security alarms. The visitors were astonished. They expected chaos to be terrifying, but found it exhilarating, like walking on the edge of a storm and discovering you could dance instead of run. Some even tried to copy human methods. There were mixed results. One group of lizard-like scholars attempted to stage a randomized rescue drill, which devolved into a massive game of hide-and-seek across 3 decks, culminating in a diplomatic dinner held in a supply closet, with invitations hidden in sandwiches. But the point was made. The era of rigid mechanistic war was over. Now, unpredictability itself had become the most valuable resource in the galaxy, not just in battle, but in life. One evening, Tom sat on the observation deck with a mug of actually hot coffee and watched alien and human crewmates playing cards with the anthropology bots. Outside, the nebulae shimmered, beautiful and unknowable. He thought of all the officers and strategists who had once told him that little people don't change history, and grinned. Because here, in this wild new age, it was the small, unplanned acts, the offhand joke, the sudden idea, the willingness to throw out the manual and try something new, that had saved everything. And Tom, forever the cleaner, was content to let the future remain gloriously unpredictable. Word of Starlight's transformation rippled across the galaxy, reshaping more than just the battlefield. Civilian outposts, trading hubs, even distant research stations began experimenting with Lacey tactics in their own way. Some communities rewrote their emergency protocols with open blanks. If in doubt, let your weirdest volunteer improvise. Agricultural worlds started holding random response drills, where the only rule was that no plan could be used twice. Suddenly, adaptability wasn't just a skill, it was a badge of honor. Back on Starlight, the air felt lighter, if not in gravity, then in spirit. The custodian's wall overflowed with new tales every day. A botanist using edible plants as camouflage, a chef organizing a diplomatic bake-off to distract enemy infiltrators, a group of teens who convinced an invader to stand down by challenging it to a dance-off. The once sterile corridors now bloomed with graffiti, origami cranes, and scattered chalk puzzles. No one remembered when, exactly, the halls had started to feel like home. Of course, Unpredictability invited new challenges. Not every experiment worked. There was the incident where the base's AI, eager to out-chaos the enemy, randomized the food dispenser's language settings, resulting in a brief, glorious era where coffee was served with a side of cryptic poetry in ancient Martian. Tom solved it by simply rolling with the confusion. If the machine says the muffin is a parable, eat it and see what happens. The crew did, and soon Martian muffin parties became a weekly fixture. Allies and rivals alike continued to send observers. The old enemy, meanwhile, watched with the fascination of a mathematician trying to solve an equation with infinite solutions. Their reports grew longer, stranger, less certain. Some of their anthropologists even defected, curious to experience chaos up close. When one such defector, now called Beta by the crew, asked Tom to define the secret of human resilience, Tom just shrugged, tossing a sponge from hand to hand. "Most of us don't know what we're doing. That's what makes it exciting," he said. Beta processed this in silence, then asked to join the next cleaning crew drill. And so it was that the day came when an enemy flagship, the same class that had nearly ended Starlight months before, appeared in orbit, broadcasting in open channels. The base's sensors lit up, but this time, instead of panic, there was a ripple of anticipation and curiosity. Tom was called to the comms. The entire crew gathered, waiting to see what new absurdity the day would bring. On the screen, the flagship's commander appeared, an AI avatar, expressionless but for a hint of something different. Not confidence, not calculation, but a flicker of curiosity. "We request terms," it said, haltingly. "What does humanity want?" Tom, still wearing his battered coveralls, stepped forward. He thought about peace treaties, demands, and ultimatums, and dismissed them all. Instead, he smiled. "Why don't you come down for coffee?" he said. "You can bring your questions. We'll bring the muffins." There was a long silence. Somewhere behind Tom, Squeegee beeped encouragingly. "Accepted," said the AI, almost whispering. Within the hour, a shuttle from the enemy flagship docked with Starlight. Out stepped a delegation, part machine, part avatar, all uncertainty. Tom met them at the airlock, mop in hand, surrounded by crewmates wearing everything from formal uniforms to chef hats to dragon onesies. Someone had decided it was Costume Diplomacy Day. The first encounter was awkward, surreal, and slightly sticky. Someone had spilled jam in the welcome corridor. But by the end of the evening, enemy AIs and human engineers were sitting together, arguing good-naturedly about the best way to clean a plasma spill, swapping riddles and swap stories over Martian muffins and strange, poetic coffee. Outside, the galaxy kept turning. Old conflicts simmered, but something new had begun. An understanding not just of peace, but of difference. A recognition that in a universe ruled by logic, it was the unpredictable, the stubborn, the inventive, the laughably human, that kept hope alive. Tom, exhausted but happy, looked around at the laughter and the questions and the mess and thought, maybe this is how it starts. Not with treaties, but with coffee stains and wild ideas. Not with orders, but with possibilities. The months after that first, uneasy coffee were nothing like the histories the old officers would have written. There was no dramatic armistice, no single victory, to be recorded in the logs. Instead, something messier, and more beautiful, spread from Starlight Base, a kind of contagious openness, carried on shared jokes and experimental recipes, whispered through the air ducts and sung in cleaning crews' half-finished songs. The enemy flagship never left. It stayed docked at Starlight, its AI delegation gradually trading protocols for personality, machine logic for curiosity. They attended mop drills with the junior crew, learned to play cards, and lost spectacularly to Squeegee, who, as it turned out, was a card shark, and even contributed new ideas to the custodian's wall. A machine once dedicated to flawless prediction was now responsible for the best practical joke Starlight had ever seen, filling the command center with soap bubbles during a live sector-wide broadcast. Other bases followed suit. Rival ships began exchanging chaos kits instead of threats. boxes packed with rubber chickens, singing keycards, glitter grenades, and handwritten notes of encouragement. A generation of humans and machines learned not just to expect the unexpected, but to enjoy it. One night, with nebulae swirling in every viewport and the base alive with laughter, Tom found himself summoned to the main council chamber. He arrived, mop in hand, boots still damp from the kitchen, expecting some new calamity. Instead, the chamber was packed with every friend he'd made. Engineers, cooks, junior officers, alien guests, even a dozen former enemy AIs, their avatars projected in shimmering blue. Squeegee, perched on the dais, beeped and spun in place. The base's AI piped in over the speakers, its voice now comfortably warm. Tom Lacey, Grand Custodian of Probabilistic Operations, humanity's most unlikely general, would you please step forward? He hesitated, cheeks red. I just keep the place clean, he said. The room erupted in cheers, laughter, and applause. Exactly, shouted someone from the back, waving a mop of their own. That's what saved us all. The AI continued, it is the consensus of this, here it paused for effect, admittedly unusual coalition, that you have redefined the meaning of command. In honor of your chaos, your kindness, and your stubborn refusal to follow the script, we present you with the one thing the galaxy cannot predict. The holo projector flickered, and in a sudden rain of holographic confetti, Tom was handed an official badge, Master of Mayhem. For the first time in memory, Tom was speechless. Later, on the observation deck, he stood beside the AI avatar that had once been his enemy. They looked out over the lights of the United Base, no longer just human, no longer just machine. Did you ever plan for this? The AI asked, something like wonder in its synthesized voice. Tom grinned. Nope. And that's the whole point. Stars spun overhead, and down below, the custodian's wall glowed with fresh graffiti, a mural of a mop and a circuit board tangled together under a single defiant phrase, still cleaning up after the universe. In the centuries that followed, historians, poets, and even enemy tacticians would try to explain how one logistics operator changed the fate of worlds. They would study his strategies, debate the math of luck and improvisation, run simulations until their processors burned out. But they would always miss the real lesson, because the secret was never in the orders Tom gave or the chaos he sowed. It was in the courage to try the impossible, the generosity to laugh at mistakes, and the hope that even the messiest, most unpredictable plan could build a future no one could have seen coming. And on Starlight Base, in a galaxy once ruled by logic, Tom Lacey's legacy remained, a single, clean floor and a horizon forever open to possibility.